All right, welcome everyone. Today we're looking at adding the shell to the game. We're going to have a object shell parent and some child shells that get shot out by the tanks. So that's our goal today. Where are we now in our development? Let me just run the game and show you the current state of the game. Of course, my machine isn't responding very well, but it's loading slowly. So here we are. We have this ability to drive around. I hit the fire button, and it's not doing anything yet. I can't move. Oh, I guess I can move tank 1. So I got tank 1 working. Okay, so that's good. We do have a little problem here because the tanks can drive through themselves. And then we have some UI issues we have to solve as well. And there's our score. We can't actually test the score thing yet because we can't shoot each other. So let's figure out how to do that. First thing you need to do is create the shell sprite. You always start with the sprite if it has a sprite, so we start there. And I'm going to create a sprite. Now, in your version of GameMaker, they've changed the UI a little bit. And you can put things in any folder that you want. So sometimes you got to make sure you get things in the right folder. So here, I think in the new version, if you go to the sprites folder and you click and you say create, it says create, and then it gives you everything you can create instead of just a sprite. So we're going to create a sprite, and we're going to import in that shell sprite. So let's look at that. That's out in your S drive, but that's my W drive. And I go into Tank War, Resources, and I'm grabbing this shell. Okay, so you'll note we have the same problem here with the shells as we did with the tanks. We only need one shell, really, and then we're going to have the new version of GameMaker control the direction of the sprite. So first thing I would do here, well, I give it a name, I guess. So we say sprite shell. No, yeah, just sprite shell. We're going to use the same sprite for both types of shells. We really do want the shell to be centered, though. So we shoot it out of the middle of the tank. So we got to make sure we change this origin to middle center. And again, my machine, I don't know what it's doing. I have no idea. Okay, so middle center. All right, so that's step 1. Next thing is we need to delete the rest of these sprites. That was the old way of doing it, where you'd have to rotate it. So go into Edit Image, and then select the second one, and then hold down the Shift key and select the last one. Except mine didn't register, so let me try again. Leave the first one, but choose the rest of them and just say delete. Hit the delete key. And I hit my delete key 10 seconds ago, so let's see if it ever does that. Delete. Yeah, my computer's almost unresponsive. There we go, finally. Okay, so, and then the last thing to do was make the background color transparent. So we'll remove that color. So choose this one and say make transparent. Okay? I forgot to mention, I did put day 2's video, last time video out on YouTube. So if you're behind and you need to watch that video's there. This is day 3. So now we have the sprite. Now we can create the objects. Our first object that we need to create is the parent shell. So we say obj underscore shell underscore parent. Okay. This is where we're going to put all the things that are generally true for all all shells, not specific to any shell. We don't set the sprite because, again, we should never create one of these. In other programming languages, this is called an abstract base class. So it doesn't, it's never going to be turned into an object. So here's our shell parent. And what should our shell parent do? Well, a couple things. I think the first thing it needs to do is orient itself based upon which way the tank is pointed. So I think that should be in the child, though. So what does what's the thing that the shells all have to do? I suppose the first one is when they hit the wall, I guess. So let's add a collision event with wall. So collision with wall 1. What should happen? Well, we need to create a small explosion. So when the parent shell hits a wall, this is true for both shell 1 and shell 2, so we're putting it here. We're going to say create, and then grab this one, create instance. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an instance of a small explosion. That's this one. Okay, so here's where I lost my audio when I was recording the video. My battery died, so I'm just going to describe this. So what we're doing is we're creating the small explosion in the same location as the tank, or as the shell, actually. And then what we want to do is we want to destroy the shell. So we create the small explosion, and then we destroy self, which is the shell 1. And then I think we're good after we hit the wall. Now, the reason why, instead of changing objects from like a shell to an explosion, the reason I don't do that here is because when you change objects, the new object retains the speed and direction of the previous object, so you have these explosions kind of moving through the walls, and that's not what you want. So what I do is I create an instance of the explosion just to make sure that it happens, and then I delete the shell. So now, what happens when you hit wall 2? Well, we want to do the same two things. We want to create a small explosion, and then we want to destroy the shell, but we want to do some other things too. What we want to do is we want to take the wall 2 and move it outside the room temporarily until an alarm goes off. So let's add that collision event with wall 2 here. Doing that now, and then and so we'll paste in those two from the wall 1 collision. I tried using inheritance on this one, but that didn't really work, or calling the parent, and that didn't seem to work out. So we'll just do a little bit of redundant coding here. It's the same thing. You create a small explosion where the shell is. You destroy the instance of the shell, but this time we want to move the wall outside the visible viewport on the room. So we need to jump to a point. It used to be called jump to position, but now they call it jump to point. And then what we want to do is we're going to kind of be silly here, and we're going to jump to a point that's way outside the room. So I'm going to say wherever the wall is right now, or other, you got to make sure that says other, because that's the bullet hit the wall, and we want the wall to move to outside the room. So we say, well, I'm going to add 100,000 to it, to the x-coordinate. Make sure it really is outside the room, and say relative. Do the same thing for y, so it's way, way off screen, somewhere out in memory land. That's good. And then what we want to do is we want to set an alarm on the wall so that after a certain amount of time the wall comes back to its original position. So yeah, so we have to do an alarm event. So let's see if I do that here. Let's go and add alarm. And we'll take that and put it in here. And then here we got to decide how long we want the wall to be away. I was thinking 300 is about right. I kind of timed out. It's about 6 seconds. Our frame rate seems to be around 50 something frames per second, but I'm not certain about that. So 300. Now I need to find out what the actual frame rate is of the room. It used to be easy. You just ask the room what your frame rate is, but not so much anymore. It's a little bit more difficult. So I got to look that one up. But anyway, we're going to start with 300 as our countdown. But we got to make sure we set the alarm on the wall and not the shell, because the shell's being destroyed. It would make sense to set an alarm on the shell. So it's on the wall. But I realize that too, when you set an alarm on an object like the wall or the other thing, you also have to put in an event handler to handle the point in time in which the alarm goes off. So I just lost my mic, so hang on. That song. Yeah, so my mic just died. Coming back here, let's take a look. So on the other end, wall 2 now has an alarm that we have to respond to. So we go over to wall 2. So here's wall 2, and I say add event, and this is the alarm event, alarm 0. Now every object can have up to 11 different alarms going off. And they're unique to that object, so you can have an alarm 0 on another object, and that's a different alarm. But here we are. Here's alarms. And what do we want to happen? Well, we just want it to move back to its original location, right? So here we say jump again. And here we say jump to start. And that will make it jump back to its starting position. But this causes a problem, okay? The problem is you only want to jump back to the start if there's nothing in the way. What if there's a tank parked right where that wall is supposed to come back to? Oh, thank you. So what do? We've got to check to see if there's nothing in the way before we jump back to our starting position. So we have to ask a question. We can say this, if. So we're going to put an if statement right up here on top. Okay. The variable we're going to look for is, oh, actually it's not that. That's the wrong one. I can never remember this one. I'm going to type in any. Yeah, that's the one. This is what we want. If any object at place. That's a very specific one. If any object at place. Well, we want to check to see if there's not. So make sure to click on not. This wall's starting position. So the way you say this is you say x start. It's all one word. There's no period, no underscore. Just x start. It's not relative. And then this should be y start. So this is a new variable we haven't talked about yet. X start is its starting x position. Y start is its starting y position. That will check to see if that starting point doesn't have anything in it. And if it doesn't, then we have it drag this over to the right. So we know there's nothing there, so we can jump to that location. Okay? We only want to do that when that spot is empty, so make sure you select not here. But what do we do if there is something in the way? Well, we just need to wait. But how do we wait? Well, this is how you wait. You would say else. This is the case when there is something in the way. Put that on the bottom of the if statement. And then, this is kind of tricky. You just set the alarm again. Now we're inside the wall 2 object, so I would set the alarm this time for 5. So we're in the alarm 0 event handler, but now we're setting the alarm in its own event handler. And we'll keep trying every 5 frames to see if something's in the way. And finally, if that thing gets out of the way, which is a tank or maybe a shell or something, once that's clear, then we should see the wall come back. Okay, so that's what the parent shell needs to do. Okay, again, going back to the parent shell. Well, this is wall 2, the alarm event in wall 2. But the parent shell then, now we've got that done. What happens when it collides with a wall 2? Well, this is interesting. What did we do? Well, this is tank parent. I always do that. It's shell parent we're looking at. Shell parent. That's the one. Okay, so it collides with wall 1. All it does is create an explosion, small explosion, and then destroys the instance. Wall 2, a little bit more, creates an explosion, destroys the instance, jumps way off screen, and then sets the alarm on the wall. Okay? Now, clearly we can't test this yet. Usually I like to make changes and test it right away, but I can't test it because I don't have a shell yet. All I have is the shell parent, which doesn't even have a sprite. Okay? So in order to make this work, we need to add some stuff. We have to make the first shell, I guess. So let's do that. So we have our sprite already. Let's make our first shell. This is the shell for tank 1. It's called shell 1. So here say object underscore shell 1. And then we'll choose our shell sprite. There it is. And what do we need to do? Well, when it gets created, remember the tank is going to create this shell. So we're going to add a create event here. And there's a few things we need to do in this create event. We have to get the shell pointed, the sprite of the shell pointed in the same direction as the tank. We also have to actually turns the shell's direction into that same direction as the tank. So the direction and the picture are two different things. And then we also have to give it a speed so it actually moves away from the tank. So how do we do all those things? So first I would say angle. This one here, set instance rotation. Remember, this is how we're doing the tanks as well. We want to set this angle of the shell the same rotation as the tank. This is shell 1. This is tank 1. So you say object underscore tank 1. Is that what we called it? Yeah. Dot direction. So whatever direction the tank is pointed, that's the same one we want to. Don't click relative here. Okay? We also have to set the shell's direction as well. So let's do that. Direction there. And we want this one, set direction variable. And this seems kind of redundant, but it's the exact same contents. We want the sprite to be pointing in the right direction, and we also want the shell to also move in that direction that it's pointed, so we have to do it twice. And then finally, we have to give it some kind of speed. And so we've got it pointed the right way. We can just set the speed then into the direction, and we'll say 8 seems to be a pretty good speed. That means it's moving 8 pixels per frame. Okay? So now we have our shell. We can fire it. But what we don't have is a triggering event that actually fires the shell. So let's say for tank 1, this is shell 1. So let's go to tank 1 then. So I'm going to Object Tank 1. I'm going to add another key press here. Now notice these are all key down events because we want them to repeat. But for this one, we don't want it to repeat. We want them to have to pick up their finger and place it back down to fire another shot off. So we say add event. Instead of a key down event, we're going to do a key pressed event. And we're going to use our space bar for the left side player. That's the fire key. People like using the space bar for fire keys because it's nice and big and it's really easy to smash on because it's so large. So we're going to do that. So we press the space bar, and then how do we initiate the firing of the shell? Well, all we have to do simply is to create it. Remember, in the create event of the shell, it's going to do the movement and all of that stuff. So we would say here, create, and all we have to do is create the shell in the same location as the tank. So we say shell 1, because tank 1s shoot shell 1s, okay? Okay, so is that everything? I think so. Let's see if we can fire. Yeah, that's fine. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, so here's me firing. You can see the bullets kind of flying around. But what do you see here? These shells aren't affecting the walls. They're not turning into explosions like we told it to. What's the problem here? Anybody know? The other problem with these shells is they go all the way across the room. I don't think we want that. It's too far. Okay, so anybody have an idea what's wrong? Well, we made the collisions with wall 1 and wall 2. Those are all good guesses, yeah. No, the actual problem is I forgot to make the shell, a shell 1, a child of the parent shell. Remember, that all that stuff's on the parent shell. So we have to set the parent to shell parent. Now it will inherit, the collision with wall 1 and wall 2. If I don't have that there, then these aren't there. So let's try again. Here I go. Okay, so now I'm going to fire. Oh, that's tank 1. But you'll note here the shells are hitting the wall, and it is making a little explosion, but it's putting the explosion in the wrong place. See how the explosion is too low compared to where the bullet hits the wall? Let me just do it horizontal here. See that? It seems like it's not centered on the bullet, and it isn't. And why isn't it? And the answer is we forgot to center our explosions. Remember, that's up in the sprites here. So here's the small one, right, the one we're using. But notice it still says top left. Well, the sprite for the shell is actually middle center. So this also has to be middle center. Okay. And then also do the same thing with the large explosion. Now there's a couple things wrong here with the large explosion. First of all, well, first we have to fix this to say middle center. But then if you look at my last little thing over here, I can't see it. Hang on a sec. I just want to make sure that, I guess that's fine. Okay. So this one's centered as well. I guess that's all we need to do. So now when we play the game and I shoot into the wall, see, I shoot into the wall, and it's now the explosion is centered right where the thing hits the wall. Still not affecting the other tank, Oh, look at the wall too, so. See how they disappear? And then after a while they come back? See that? The other thing is if I park my tank right there, see that? Those walls are trying really hard to come back, but they can't because there's something in the way, namely the tank. So as soon as I move my tank off, it takes about 5 frames, and that's really fast. It should put the walls there. See, as soon as I moved away, the walls come back. That's kind of cool. So here I'm parked where the walls are. And they don't come back until I get out of the way. All right? So that's pretty slick. I like that. All right. So we have tank 1 working, but we don't have tank 2 working yet. What's the fire key for tank 2? Well, we're using our arrow keys to drive it, but our fire key is the enter key on the number pad. If you use the enter key on the keyboard side, there's something weird about this keyboard controller, because if you hit the enter key, it makes the other player's keystrokes stop working. Okay? So you have to use the enter key that's over on the number pad. Okay, so how do you do that? So now we have to create a shell 2. Let's just duplicate shell 1. Let's see if this is always a bad idea when you duplicate, but you can duplicate objects. We say duplicate. So we're duplicating it, and we want to call this shell 2. I have no idea what's going on with my computer. It's very odd. So I'm going to rename this to object shell 2. And then we'll go in and take a look at it to see what it does. So here I'm getting that error again. Again, anytime you get this error at home or at school, make sure to say save. Because OneDrive is frantically trying to keep those synced up. Okay, so we see that shell 2 is is a child of shell parent, so that's important. We inherit the wall and wall 2 things from the parent, but this create event we have to change. Okay. So in the create event, now instead of being tank 1's direction, it's tank 2's direction. So change that to tank 2. Okay. So that's the first thing you have to do. And then the next thing you have to do is we have to go into tank 2 and enable the fire button. So here's tank 2. Notice we don't have an enter key yet. So we're going to say add event. And we're going to say key pressed. It's important to say key pressed. And then enter. Yeah, I guess we have to use this one. Enter. And we say, okay, what do we want it to do? Well, we want it to do the same thing we did in tank 1. So I'm going to look at tank 1's enter key. Yeah, all we did was create the shell. So let's do that. So we say create object 0, 0. We want to create shell 2 because we're in tank 2. And then that's everything. So now let's try tank 2 to see if tank 2 can shoot down the walls. Okay, so here's tank 2 now. Let's see if I can fire. I can. It looks like tank 2's shells inherited all that behavior. And again, tank 2, if it's in the way, the walls don't come back. But what we don't have yet working is there's no damage, it seems, to tank 1 yet. Okay. We do have the health bars, though. That's good. So our next step is, how do we get the tanks to damage each other with these shots? So let's look at that. Now clearly it's going to be when shell 1 hits tank 2. So we're going to go to object shell 1. And we're going to add a collision event with tank 2, right? So when shell 1 hits tank 2, here's tank 2, what should happen? Well, first thing we need to do is create a small explosion. So here be another one, create instance. So we create small explosions when the shots hit the walls, but we also do the same thing when they hit the other tank. So we say tank 2, well no, we want to say object explosion small. We want to center it on the shell, right? So we're in the shell object, so we'll do that. See, we're object shell. And then we call that good. All right. Next, we want to take away some health from the tank that we just hit. So here, if you type in health, we want to do this one, set health. But we're not setting the health of the shell. The shell doesn't really have a health that we care about. So we want to set the health of the other thing, the thing we just hit. We already know it's a tank 2, or this collision event wouldn't have been triggered. So we know the other thing's a tank 2. And we want to take off 10 points of health. Remember, we start with 100, and say relative. So this is shell 1, tank 2. Okay, so let's try this and see if it gets rid of some health. What you find is it'll behave perhaps in a way you don't expect. This is kind of funny, actually. So watch what happens. I shoot tank 2, blah, and it chunked off maybe 70 health points just with one shot. If I do it again, all the health is gone. So it only took 2 shots, and I've used up all the health. I only told it to take 10 health away. So why is it taking away 70 and 30? Anybody have an idea? Well, what's happening here is we're forgetting to get rid of the shell. So what happens if you don't destroy the shell, it keeps colliding with the tank every frame. And so every frame it takes a little bit more off until it clears the tank. Notice how the shell goes through the tank and never stops. The explosions are there. You see the explosions? Okay, so what we have to do, we have to remember to do, is we need to destroy the shell. Right? So that's just self, because we're in the shell right now. So we want to destroy the shell. And then that should only take 10 points off. So let's try it now and see. Okay, so here I go. I'm going to go find the tank. And I shoot it. Boom. 2. Notice it turns from green to red as you lose points. Now it's red. Got one more. Here's the last one. Well, before I do the last one, what should happen here? Yeah, when the tank loses all its health, it probably should explode, because explosions are cool. But then after that, well, we'll find out. So here, I shoot it. It has no more health. It's supposed to be dead, and it's not dead yet. And I can keep shooting it ad infinitum, and nothing happens to the tank at this point. So losing health, we're keeping track of that, but we're not keeping a track of when we're supposed to die. So we leave that up to the tank, actually. So a lot of people would put it here in the collision event between the shell and the tank, where they would test to see if the tank has any more health. But why don't we have the tank do that itself? Okay, so we go to the tank parent. This is where it gets really weird. Okay, so we go to tank parent and we say, okay, we need to check all the time whether we have any health left. And if we ever run out of health, we need to blow ourselves up. Okay? So which of these events would you put that kind of check? Well, the create event only happens at the beginning, so that wouldn't work. Draw GUI, well, you should be only drawing stuff there. Wall 1? No. It would be here in the step event. We could ask in the step event how much health we have. So we can ask this question. We can say, if health, see this one here? If health. So then we would say, well, if the health of the tank is less than or equal to 0, that means we're dead. So we should create an explosion object. So drag that to the right of the health thing. If health is 0, then we need to create a large explosion. That's this one. We'll center it on the tank, because that's the thing that's exploding. And then I think we're good. What if it's not less than or equal to 0? What if it's greater than 0? Well, then we don't want to do anything, so we don't need an else part. We still need to get rid of the shell. Well, no. We need to get rid of the tank. So let's destroy the tank. It's weird how the tanks destroy themselves. So you drag that to the bottom. So you want to create a large explosion and then destroy the tank. All right, so let's try that. All right, so here's tank 1. I'm going to go destroy tank 2. Okay, so the hope is that we can get the tank to go away. So I shoot the tank. Oh, I missed. Shoot the tank. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It worked. See how the tank is gone? Well, it didn't work quite well. Let's see what's wrong with this. Now, I think that's fine. But what is wrong with that? You blow up the other tank and then what? Well, you don't have another tank now, so you have no opponent anymore, and now you just drive around and shoot at walls. No, what you need is to give 1 point to the other player, and then you want to restart the room. Okay? So let's do that here. We figured out that we're supposed to blow up. We destroy, we create a large explosion in our current position. We destroy ourselves, and then we want to set the controller's score. I think our score is on our controller, right? Let's just look. Here's our controller. In the create event, we create score 1 and score 2. So yeah, we have to use the controller here. So going back then, we were on, yes, that's fine if you hurry back. Just 5 minutes, so. So here then, the hard part here is we're in the parent tank, so we don't know which tank we are. We just have no idea which tank we are, because this is in the parent tank. We haven't differentiated between tank 1 and tank 2. So we have to figure out which tank we are. Are we tank 1 or are we tank 2? How do you ask that question? This is what took me all this time yesterday, trying to figure this out. So what you do is you just say if here, if, and not if health, but this one, if, and make sure you type this in correctly. You would say object, it's called index, object index is equal to object tank 1. If the current tank object, if it's a tank 1, that's what you're saying in English, then we want to add one to tank 2 score, okay? So we would say set, well, the score is in the controller, right? So where's the variable ones? Oh, come on, it's not that hard. Here, this one, set variable, assign variable. Now, this is where you have to type it in exactly correctly or it's not going to work. obj underscore controller. Okay. When it gives you a list like that, choose it from the list because that way it's not going to be misspelled. And then the value, we want to add 1. We know this tank 1 that has exploded, so we want to add 1 to score 2. So you say dot score 2 and make sure it's relative. So if it's tank 1 that's blowing up, then we want to add 1 to tank or score 2. Now, a lot of people would ask the same question again and say, if object index equals tank 2. But you don't need to ask that question because if it's not tank 1, you already know it's tank 2 because there's only 2 tanks, right? So don't ask this question. Don't ask questions you already know the answer to. So here you say else. And so we put that over there on the bottom of the if statement. And then this time, I'm just going to copy that and I'll paste it onto the right of that. And this time, I'll say, well, we know it's tank 2 that's blowing up, so we need to add 1 to tank 1. Okay? The reason why we have to use object index is because we don't know at the parent level which tank we're talking about. Okay? So this allows us to figure that out. Okay, let's see if that works. See if our score gets updated. And my prediction is this is not going to work. Unfortunately, my predictions are pretty accurate. Hay un gran problema aquí. Okay, so here's tank 1, and our hope is, well, what are we hoping? Well, the red tank, if we blow up tank 2, then we want the red score to go up by 1. So we're hoping for a red 1 to appear up there. And so here I am blowing up tank 2. Okay, so watch. 1. Hey, it stayed there. But then we have a problem. Now we need to restart the room because one of the tanks blew up, right? So now we need to restart the room. So type in restart here. And that will don't use restart game, use restart room. And you want to put it on the bottom of the else. So it comes after the else. The line looks really bad. How you're supposed to figure that out based on that line. But yes, that's after the else. It's not part of the if statement. So we restart the room. So let's do it again. This may not be the right place for this. I want to see the big explosion. I don't think we get to see the big explosion if we do it this way. Okay, so again, we want to see increase by 1 and then restarts the room. We do that, and notice how our score did not change. All we did was restart the room. Why is that? Well, that's because our controller just got recreated. That means our controller just called its create event and reinitialized itself. So how do we solve this problem? A couple things. Well, there's still another problem too. So I shoot this, but the question is, do we ever see the large explosion? No. See, we didn't see the large explosion. It's not very satisfying. You'd rather see the tank blow up. So this is in the wrong place. Restart room. If we want to see the explosion, we have to do this at the end of the large explosion. So I would cut it from here. And then where it would go is I would go to the animation end event of the large explosion. See, we already have one. And see how it destroys itself? We also want to restart the room at that point. So I'm going to paste in that restart room. Okay. We want to do this at the end of the explosion so you can see the tank blew up. But that still doesn't solve our problem with the score. The score keeps getting zeroed out every time we restart the room. Let's see if this works. So my prediction is that we'll see the explosion happen, but it still give us the wrong score. So I'm shooting this. Here we are, last one. See the explosion, and it restarts the room. So that's good. But our score got zeroed out. Yeah. Yeah, that's the solution. Very good. Very, very good. So your controller then needs to be persistent so it doesn't get recreated. Okay? So make your controller persistent. We use this to solve a couple of problems in other games too. If we do that, then it doesn't get zeroed out because it's not going to get recreated because the create event only get called at the beginning of the game, really. So let's try it now. Let's see if the score goes up by 1. Okay, so here we are, just about to die. We're hoping that the 0 will become a 1 and stay that way, and it does. And the tanks go back to their original position. Okay, that's very good. Okay. Now, conversely, does it work for tank 2? I can fire things. Fire, fire, fire. Notice that there's no damage yet to tank 2, and why is that? Because we haven't told it what to do yet. Here, shell 1, we have this collision with tank 2, right? We do all this stuff. But, so I'm selecting all this just by hitting the shift key as I select it. I'm going to copy that. And this is in the collision event between shell 1 and tank 2. So we want shell 2 and tank 1 collision. So go to the collision between shell 2 and tank 1. So you choose tank 1 here. So if it's tank 1 getting collided with, then what do we do? Well, let me paste in what we do. Okay. So we create an instance of the explosion, the small explosion. Make sure it's a small one, because the large one will restart the room, and we don't want to do that. We set the health of the other thing to -10. So you've got to say other here. And then we destroy instance of self, which is the shell. And then the rest of it is taken care of by the parent tank. So now let me go try doing this. And see if the number. So now shell 2 is going to, or tank 2 is going to drive up there and shoot tank 1. Okay, and we do that. It blows up, and then we're back. Let's see if it retains the other one now. If I go out and shoot tank 2 now, we have one issue that's kind of bugging me. But okay, what's the issue that's bugging me? Maybe you have an idea. You don't really see it in the wall. You see it there in the tank. If you look at the little explosion, right? See how the explosion is behind the tank, not on top of the tank? That bothers me. Because usually if you hit the outside of the tank, it would be on the top-ish part, and you would see the explosion on the top. So the explosion and the tank are being drawn in the wrong order. The explosion is getting drawn first before the tank is getting drawn. But we'll fix that problem next time. But now you actually have a game you can play. Hey, it's a playable game now, right? So if you have a neighbor you want to test this out with, you can try that out. Now again, the word of warning here is you want to make sure to use the enter key on the number pad, not the enter key on the keyboard. Yeah, question? Yeah, sure. Okay, so we got the score working. We've got the damage happening. Is there a lot else to do here? Well, you need to design a much better room. Oh, we got to do the views, right? We're going to do the Mario Kart thing where you have a zoomed-in view of your tank, and they'll have a zoomed-in view of their tank in another part of the screen, and then we'll have a mini-map on the bottom. So we're going to do that. We're also going to fix the collision masks on our tanks because they're way too big, and the collision masks for everything else as well. So still some work to do here, but mostly done. All right, I'll stop right now.